Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson.
What's up, badasses? Welcome to today's episode. We are going to start with an invitation to my women's coaching circle that begins on October 1st. I start everybody with a phone call first to make sure that it is a good fit for you. It is a good fit for you if you love this podcast. And today's topic is overwhelm, which most women that I know feel more than above average feeling of overwhelm. And this is exactly why I created the circle, because we go through life with all of this stress and overwhelm and feeling of exhaustion, and we don't have a place to put it. And when women come into the women's coaching circle, you have a place to put it, a dedicated space to work on your goals. This could look like nutrition. This could look like having better relationships with yourself, with your family. This could look like work goals that you have. There's many entrepreneurs that are in the women's circle. This is for any woman that has just shit that she doesn't have a place to put. And maybe her circle that she has, the people that you surround yourself, it's not really made for that. Or maybe your partner, that's just not the relationship that you have right now. And you don't feel like you have that sort of level of deepness just yet. Whatever it is, this is a dedicated space that you come to and be able to process and work through and move forward. It's not like we just sit in the shit. It's let's dump it out. Let's figure out everybody's working on something different, but there's always a common theme, and we move forward on that thing, whatever it would be. So that starts October 1st. I would love to have a conversation with you to kind of figure out what it is. What are your goals? What are you working on? What would you like to achieve? And then we work together for 7 months and we get the shit done. We get the shit done. We have had great results. The people that have been in the past circles are such good friends now. They continue to support each other, and we're on group text with each other, just, funny, silly inside jokes and support big life happenings that they still share, because it's kind of like you're in the fire together. Many of the people in it are also introverts, as am I, which you kind of wouldn't know it by this, but it's like painfully introverted. So you think like, oh, it's kind of tricky to share, but after a couple of weeks, it's not difficult anymore. It actually feels really, really good. And 100% of the time, when you get off the call, every single time, I feel so much better. I feel so much lighter that I'm just so glad I showed up today. I was busy and I made sure I made time to be here, and I feel so much better. And that's one of the things we're going to get into later, is the fact that you have a preset mindset of I'm busy, I can't fit that in. And that's one of the things keeping you stuck in the overwhelm, because you have this it's a fixed mindset that there's nothing you can do about it, when in fact there is. And by carving out time, like the women's circle, you are actively making yourself feel better, less overwhelmed, less stress. And 100% of the women that have been in the women's circle feel just exactly that. So send me a message. Everything is in show notes that you can reach me. Otherwise, my website, AleciaJacobson.com. That's ALE, not ALI. AleciaJacobson.com. You can set up a time with me there. All right, let's get into it. I'm also going to give you a little life update with me. A couple of the podcast episodes that I've had, the last couple, have kind of had some real personal things. And I just kind of wanted to share, because probably over the last 6 to 8 weeks, I've kind of been on this life journey that has been challenging and also really lovely. I think I shared that my husband took on a new role at work, which has him traveling quite a bit. It is a positive thing overall. However, we have a lot of moving pieces. So me having to kind of do these things solo can be a little challenging, but we ended up having some really great conversations. And this really neat thing happened where now we're having even better conversations. And it's almost like our relationship has deepened, which is we've already had. There's something, not advocating for divorce, but there's just something the second time around that is just, We've always had a really solid kind of foundation, but it's just been really good. So to say when you're in a hard time, if things are struggling, it doesn't have to be that way. Good can come out of it. And then for me personally, I have kind of some space where I am exploring what does success and happiness look like now. It's shifting for me a little bit, kind of from the traditional career focus. Not that I'm not focused on my career, but measuring your success by your output versus what brings you true happiness on the inside, which is things I work with people on all the time, but I'm kind of putting myself through a happiness boot camp and making myself a little bit more uncomfortable, which was the theme from last week. The topic was kind of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and that is to be expected. And one of the things that I'm doing, I talk about this. I don't even know if I talk about it on social media and if I've talked about it on here, but the people close to me now, I have a ridiculous amount of anxiety, like paranoia stuff. I worry about death a lot. I have talked about this on here. And one of the things is just kind of going out and being in nature or doing things by myself. I go through all of these kind of stories in my head. So one of the things I'm challenging myself to do is to go out and be in nature by myself. Now, I haven't quite done it yet, but I did get, because I'm afraid of something going wrong. So I bought myself this like alarm thing that I can pull. But it was really funny because my husband and I went for a little hike today, and I was supposed to do it by myself, but then he ended up having some space that he could do it with me. And we pulled into the parking lot. And as we're getting on the trail, he's like, "So if you were by yourself, what would you have done?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What do you think?" And he goes, "You'd have taken pictures of all the license plates and sent it to your friend and gotten the lowdown on all these people's cars." And he was so 100% right. As soon as we were pulling out of the parking lot, I saw 3 cars and I thought I should take pictures of these license plates. This is what I would be doing. And just like letting people know, here are the cars that were in the parking lot when I arrived here. So that is the level I know that other people have these things. And I also know that so many people don't have these things. They look at me like, oh my gosh, these are the things that go through your head. Yes, all the time. And I'm really working on having these feelings, which I have to do with my kids, all of the things. I have to be able to have these thoughts and feelings and still do the thing anyway. But when it comes to myself, I've sort of like boxed myself in a little bit in this, what I perceive as a safe space. But the safe space isn't working for me. I've kind of boxed myself in. I think COVID probably had a little bit to do with it too. Just got very comfy by myself and being in my house. And now I have to stop doing that. So that is my current, just doing things that bring happiness and pleasure and things where I kind of talk myself out of those things because I am afraid or I don't want, I don't know what the reasons are, but that's kind of where I'm at now. I've had this kind of self exploration and just turning inward and just doing things differently, which feels scary, very scary, and also very exciting and kind of hopeful for what's on the other side of that. If you listen to the episode from last week, I talked about how thinking about it and kind of planning for it is very uncomfortable. Doing it is uncomfortable. When you're like in the middle of it, it's uncomfortable. And then you get to this space where it's like, oh, I'm not uncomfortable anymore. And that's what I'm excited for. This, where it's like, this is just who I am now. That's what I'm excited for. All right. That's my life update. So let's get into Overwhelm today. We're going to talk about how to decrease, how to handle and not have a complete meltdown when you're kind of in the eye of the overwhelm. I think of overwhelm kind of like a tornado or a hurricane, like the eye of it. And you're kind of just like in the epicenter and you don't know what to do. It's sort of paralyzing when you get in it and people get all in their head. And before we get started, the thing that I want to just hammer home to you is you cannot think your way out of overwhelm. That is one thing. People, they get all up in their head and all it does is create more of that kind of angsty, panicky feeling of overwhelm. You cannot think your way out of overwhelm. You have to do something different. And most of the people, that is what they're doing. They're trying to think their way out of it. And that's just not how it works. When I think of overwhelm, I think of kind of 2 different pieces of it. And if you can think of a glass, just a clear glass, and you're pouring water into it, and the water is the overwhelm. Everybody sort of has a base level that they're at, that their glass is full or however much it's full of this overwhelm. And then you pour more into the glass, and then it eventually water starts pouring over. And what I want to offer you today is we learn two things. That is one, how to stop pouring more water in. We're going to turn off that faucet, and then we are going to blast a hole in the bottom of your cup to siphon the overwhelm out so that you never have it where it is just exploding, or maybe not never. I guess that's sort of an ambitious goal, but at least not where that is your constant state, where it's just, you're just overwhelmed with overwhelmed with overwhelm. Yes, that was a good line. But you know what I mean? If you can siphon it out the bottom, then it's never overflowing. It's usually at a manageable state. And there's always, we have kind of like a homeostasis, like a barometer of where we're comfortable with overwhelm. And it's when it piles up too much. And if you start living that way, then you have an issue. If that is your constant state, because you're just stressed out, you're cranky, things are not going well, you're forgetting things. All the things happen when you have too much overwhelm. So we're going to learn how to stop that faucet, turn it off, and also how to put a hole in the bottom of it so it never is getting overflowed. All right. So if we're going to start first with kind of the triage of you are in a high state of overwhelm currently, how do you get out of this intense state of overwhelm? And the first thing you need to do, and I talked about this just a couple episodes ago, is you need to get the things out of your head. And this is where you can't think your way out of it. You have to, like a brain dump, you have to take everything that is overwhelming to you. What is in your overwhelm? What is it made up of? And you either need to write it all down. So if you don't have a person to do this with, write it all down. Or this is something I do with my clients. We talk about it. Like, tell me all the things that are overwhelming to you. Or you can have a friend, but talking about it is a key piece. When people come in and they're telling me kind of whatever the circumstances that's causing them this very intense feeling, once they start talking about it, they automatically feel better. But our lives are not set up in a way where you have space to talk about what's happening. But once you do, you feel better. The person that you're talking to, or like the women's circle that I was telling you about, these are all things where it's like, oh, you're not alone. Most people feel this way. We just don't have an opportunity to have that kind of reflection on it because we don't create the space for it. But when you can dump it out and you can actually see in black and white what is causing this overwhelm, you have more clarity. You have more control over it. You have more ability to see, oh, that's not that bad. And it might still be that bad, but it's not as bad as when it's floating around in your head. I 100% promise you, it is not as bad as when you're trying to think your way out of it, as when you take it all out and you write it down. After you get it written down, then I want you to take what you can control and what you can't control. Because some of the things that are causing us overwhelm, there's nothing we can do about. And this is in the bucket of overwhelm. We've got any sort of life stressors that are causing you to feel this. Just overwhelm is really kind of, it's almost like a cement. If it's just being poured, it keeps us frozen. It keeps us stuck. We're not able to move forward. We're not able to think clearly. It's heavy. It's so heavy. And you move slower. All the things are so much harder to do when you're feeling this way. So after you get it out, what can you control and what can't you control? So some examples of this are, I'm going to kind of give you, when my husband started traveling more, I naturally was like, what the fuck? One, I can't do this on my own. And two, I don't want to. This is a lot. And I was feeling so overwhelmed and so stressed. And you've heard this before, we have our weekly meeting. And in our weekly meeting, I was like, okay, I essentially needed to do the exercise that I do with all of my clients. So he and I did this on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm putting away laundry. We're doing our sheets. We were having our meeting, but I was also moving at the same time. And I really like thinking back on that as I'm saying it out loud now. I think that movement really helped me. So this could be kind of walking with a friend or doing anything like that. That movement really helps. And we're going to get into that later. But what we did was I was thinking, okay, when this is happening, what are the things that are just kind of push me over the edge when you're gone? What do I need? One of the things we came up with was I need to have dinners planned. Now that has been a little bit revamped because what I also realized last week was that I also just want to be kind of taken care of. So that's a really lovely thing about my husband is that he's really good at just taking care of me. And I kind of am always in that caretaker role. So the dinners, I'm like, even though I want to have them planned, I also was like, I think one of the times we just need to go out to dinner or we need to do a takeout, something where I don't have to think about it. Now, this is once a week, so it's not that big of a deal, but that was one of the things to have dinners planned. And then now this week, I was like, I have to do a dinner out. It was actually really lovely. I took my little ones out last week and we had probably the best time ever. It was absolutely like soul filling, sitting there and listening to them. And we laughed and all of these things. It was wonderful. So I realized, oh, I have to alter this. And that's something that all the time you're going to have to do. Even if you make a plan, you're going to have to change it most of the time because life happens and then you adjust to that. So don't be too rigid in it. So that was one of the things. The other thing, which sounds so absolutely ridiculous and silly, but our dog goes out the front door and there is a tie out. Part of it stays in our house and part of it is outside. So I would clip him on, let him outside. Well, then he'd start barking to come back in. But the tie out would always get stuck on, I don't know what it is, edging something. And then I would have to go outside and bring him in. And I cannot tell you how much this pissed me off. It pissed me off more than it should. It's not that big of a deal, but it was irritating to me. So that was one of the things where I identified that really stresses me out when he's out there barking. I think that, and I know that other people have to be like this, those aggressive sounds really just create a stressful feeling inside of me. I like things quiet. I don't like abrupt movements or sounds or anything like that. So his like intense barking was just a little bit, my insides did not feel good. So we just moved part of it. And now that doesn't happen. Super simple. And I don't know why I didn't think about it beforehand. It took this thinking about what are the things that cause me stress and overwhelm to do that. We sat there and together here, this causes me overwhelm. And what can we do? Oh, like the after school stuff. That was one of the things. And we problem solved that. So it was like, okay, what can I do to relieve the pressure now to kind of turn off that faucet a little bit? So I'm not feeling like cannot do this, like I'm drowning. And they were all things, what can I control? Now I can't control him being gone. I can't control that we have a bazillion activities all at the same time every fucking night. I can't control that. But what I can control are these small little things that have absolutely made a huge impact. And talking to him about it made a huge impact. Getting it out, doing that brain dump of all the things. Now, the dog had nothing to do with him being gone, but I identified that as something that really was just annoying and pissed me off. And you don't need those just moments of being just irritated. So looking at, you all have that. I know that you do. Those things that are just that grate on you a little bit. What solutions can you come up with? We just had to move the freaking chain. Super easy. Why I didn't think of it before, I don't know. But looking at, dump everything out of your brain. What are the things that you can control and do something about? And what are the things where you don't have any control over? But you're going to focus on that. Here's what I can control. One of my clients, we did this exercise with her. And the number one thing, I can't believe I remember if I talked about this last week, her laundry. It was just piling up. They have all these moving parts and they got a laundry service. And this can be something where you it can be temporary. This doesn't have to be a long-term thing. And this gets to my next one, is an easy button. Get an easy button. Once you have that brain dump, can control, can't control, look at what you can control and how can you make it easy. For me, it was those dinners, like maybe the Costco take and bake things, just something where I don't have to put in a lot of energy. Now, a year from now, when I've been doing this for a long time and we are into a good rhythm, I might not need these sort of shortcuts and easy buttons. But when it is fresh and it is happening and you just got all of these new things changing, how can you make it easier on yourself? We don't have to be martyrs. We don't have to do everything perfectly. Take off that fucking cape. It's not real. Okay? We are not superheroes here. We have nothing to prove. Okay? Okay, you can have your fucking cape. I think we are all fucking amazing. However, the idea of kind of proving that you can do it, that you can handle it, no, we don't need to do that anymore. That is old, outdated. No, thank you. How can you relieve the pressure and kind of make an easy button that is temporary, or maybe it lasts? I don't know. She got the laundry service. Maybe that will be a long-term thing. This can look like pre-cut veggies. If you want to continue making sure I need to eat healthy. I usually would have all this extra time to do this meal prep, but now our weekends are different, or we're in different cities or states for travel sports or whatever the hell it is. You have a parent that you're caring for, or someone is ill. All life fucking happens. And then all of a sudden our cup was at one level and we can handle this. And then outside forces come in and now it's like, okay, it's triage time. So looking at that can control bucket, the easy button kind of idea, how can you ease it up? So we got meal service. Many people do that. You can just do it a couple months. You can, depending on where you live, there's a lot of take and bake type meals that you can get. You can do that. Laundry service, pre-cut veggies, I said. Asking for help. Who can you ask for help on what? That was one thing that I really had to do in this time because I couldn't do it. I cannot be in 4 different places all at the exact same time. I'm good. I am not that good. And I don't want to be that good. That is insane. That is insane. So my base level of overwhelm is there are 4 things happening all at the same time. I have that handled. You pour stuff on top of it, i.e. my husband traveling, a little bit more. So we have to triage this situation. All right, here's a couple more. Now, this is kind of going in a little bit different angle, but I think it applies. And if something is happening, sometimes you have to make a decision. And sometimes that overwhelm is exacerbated because you're not making a decision. This could be like a career thing, and you might have to fire somebody. You might have to hire somebody. You might have to stop doing other people's jobs, which is what we're getting into next. And what we're getting into next is who is adding to the overwhelm. And this is a big one because a lot of times you have your steady state that you can handle, and then other people come in and they add to it. One example is I had this client who we were working on her nutrition. And one of the things that was happening was after work, she was going through the drive-thru and she wanted to stop this habit. Well, after having a conversation and asking her some questions, what we realized is she was feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by the end of the day. So she was going through the drive-thru. Well, what did we realize? Why is she feeling overwhelmed and exhausted? Because she's doing other people's jobs. Because people would come into her office, knock, 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 and they would say, I need help with this. Or do you know blah, blah, blah. And it'd be easier for her to just do it for them versus make them do it themselves. She was kind of uncomfortable making them do it themselves. So she's not only doing her job, she was doing their job. And once we worked on that, those skills for, hey, you have to, we made a thing where her door was shut. So they weren't coming in and bothering her. And this was a conversation that I am having dedicated work time where I can't be bothered and my door is going to be shut. Somebody I was also just talking to talked about putting the notifications that come on your watch. This is a big one, that come on your computer while you're working. And it's like hot ding, 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 or whatever the stupid sound that it makes, but it's constantly taking away your attention and making you feel like you're not getting enough done. All of these notifications. We are not meant to have all these notifications all the time. We are not meant to have people have access to us, to our energy all of the time. And it could look like putting up some boundaries around that, turning off the notifications. And this might make you uncomfortable. Refer back to last week's episode because it will be uncomfortable. But who is adding to the overwhelm? And if you are working with people that are creating this sense of overwhelm for you, what can you do about it? What is within your control that you can do about it? The other thing when it comes to who is creating it, sometimes we have created this narrative in our minds, and it might not necessarily be helpful. This can look like an issue with a coworker. This can look like a family issue, and you're constantly thinking about it. And can you change that narrative? Can you kind of adjust your outlook? Is your outlook helpful? Is the story that you're creating? I don't remember what episode it is, but it was a thought spiral. If you're getting yourself into a thought spiral about another person or their incompetence, are you kind of enabling this incompetence with them? Is it a conversation that you had to have? Often when you're working with people, let's say that somebody reports to you or you're managing people or whatever the circumstances are, and they are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. So instead of having that conversation with them because perhaps you're uncomfortable, you just start kind of picking up the slack. And then you are allowing this kind of just lazy work or incompetence, or maybe they don't even know. But if they did what they were supposed to be doing, the pressure would be relieved off you. So you have all of these areas of life where you can relieve that pressure. It might be uncomfortable in the beginning to do it, but if you are so overwhelmed that you have to just clear that shit off your plate, having that uncomfortable conversation with somebody, hey, I know I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this, whatever it is that is their responsibility to do. I can no longer be doing this. So my expectation is that this is now, I'm transferring this back to you. And really try not to then do that sort of checking, because that you're just adding to the overwhelm with that. But is it supposed to be on your plate in the first place? And if not, let's get it the fuck off. Okay. So those are some ways that you can turn that faucet off so that it's not completely overflowing all the time. Okay. So we have the triage, the short-term plan. Now we are going into what is a long-term solution to this issue. And let me just tell you first, you are not going to like this. So just get over it. But what I'm telling you is truth. What I'm telling you is what you likely already know, but it's just a little bit difficult to do. So again, refer to last week's episode on being uncomfortable. Also, episode 26 talks about goal setting. And that one, I break down exactly how to set and achieve goals. So if this is something that you're like, oh yeah, girl, you're right, I need to start doing these things, refer back to those because it will be extremely helpful for you. All right. So first off, a question to ask yourself is, if you were not overwhelmed, what would be different? And this could look like you having more free time. This could look like you having more space to do the things that you love. Could be just free space in general where nobody is asking from you, that you get to have just free choice to do anything or nothing. Less work. If you're a person who is bringing your work home with you, if you are not having time to pee during the day, teachers, I don't know if I can do anything about that for you. But if you have back-to-back meetings and you have some autonomy over your schedule, however, you don't take that because you're concerned that it's not all going to get done, And back to people would be doing the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. And you would not be doing the job of 5 people. You would just be doing your job. And this could be at home too. One of the ways that my long-term plan right now is my husband, he's just making an appearance all over in this episode today. He likes to pick up after my children. So we are blended, and I have two big kids, and I legit don't do that shit. You will pick up your own stuff. They are very competent. I'm not saying that they are like 100%, but I don't have to make all of these reminders. They just do the thing. And especially when they were younger, that shit did not fly. I didn't walk around picking up after them. And now we have these 2 children, he and I together, and he picks up after them. And they will just leave their fucking wrappers all over the place or their clothes on the floor. No! And now with me being I already was the primary, but now that it's even amplified more, I'm like, this is one area that long-term, the shit's not going to fly. So we looped them into our weekly meetings. This week was our first one. That was one of the changes that we made. And we have very simple things that they have to do, like hanging their backpacks up on the hooks in the mudroom when they come home. Sometimes they just leave the fucker in the car and they're like, Mom, can you get this? As I have 30 things in my hands. No, but then we can't find shit in the morning. Clothes. They have to put their clothes in the laundry baskets. And what are the other thing? Oh, any wrappers or dishes have to be put away. These are very simple, very, very simple things. But this is an example of in my home jobs that I have been doing that are not mine to do. But sometimes it's just easier than bitching and nagging. But this time it's like, oh no, we are having a meeting. We are all in on this. Everybody knows the expectation. But this took far too long. Do you know how many times that this has stressed me out or pissed me off or whatever? Caused that like angsty feeling? So this is a long-term plan of, we all know this. We're going to have weekly meetings with our kids now. We'll have ours, and then we'll kind of also have one with them and just check in on it, that this is the expectation. How is it going? And I already feel we're only a day or 2 in, but I already feel a million times better. So that is an example of, if you were not overwhelmed, what would be different about how to create the hole in your cup. We're just going to blast a hole in the bottom of that cup, a pretty one, a symmetrical one. Is it symmetrical? I don't know. Whatever. It's not going to be jagged. Okay. And how we do that, and this is the part where I said that you're not going to like this, because we have to fill your soul. We have to nourish your body. And this keeps that hole, the stuff flowing through versus getting all stopped up and then overflowing when one more thing gets piled on. Okay. And what I hear all the time is, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. And what I will tell you is, if you make the time, you will feel better. And you make the time by what we just talked about, having people do their own fucking jobs, doing things that save you time in the short term so that you can start doing the things that feel good to you. And once you start to learn new ways, you are able to create time. This is one of the things, I do this in my coaching. I do this in the circle. We create time where there isn't time right now. And by having other people take accountability, or looking at the things where I don't actually have to do this. I have been doing this and spending my time doing it. Volunteering is a big one. Volunteering is lovely. But if you're the yes person, where they always know if they ask you, and this could be at work too, you have no time left. If when you do have time, you let other people in on it, meaning, oh, I have this space, so I feel guilty saying no. No, that absolutely has to go. Those are the things that are going to pile on, and you're never going to be able to have this space. Here we go. Exercise. Exercise is so important. And I told you you're going to get pissed off. Those of you already doing exercise, you ain't going to get pissed off. But those of you who you're like, I know what I have to do, I just can't do it. And this is where you're going to refer back to episode 26 on goal setting. If you know what you have to do and you're just not doing it, listen to that episode. Also, come join me in the circle because we meet 3 times a month. And if you know what you have to do, you're going to tell us. And then every week we are going to talk. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go well? What support do you need? You want to check in with us every day? Fucking check in with us every day. Let us know. You need props. You need problem solving. We got you. But you have to be doing these things to keep that whole flowing through. Exercise is a huge one. Exercise, I don't know if I've talked about it on here, but completing the stress cycle. It's in a book called Burnout. When you move your body, you are releasing stress out. You are able to have more clarity. Your mind it's like you can think differently when you have a continual exercise program. Whatever it is, whatever kind of exercise feels good for you, doing it consistently. Meditation. Another one, people, I told you I was going to piss you off. People are like, they have all sorts of things where you say, I don't know how to do it. I did it before. I didn't like it. It doesn't have to look the way that you think it has to look. It looks many, many, many different ways. You can just sit quietly and listen to an audio. It doesn't have to look like a free space of no thinking in your mind. Not at all. Creating intentional time. If you do not carve out time, you will not get out of the state of overwhelm. And this can be intentional time for exercise, for meditation, for joining my women's circle, for doing nothing, for doing a brain dump and getting everything out of your head. But you have to have this intentional time that you dedicate to yourself, to your wellness, to your mental health, to your physical health, whatever it is that you have identified. This is the thing that I know would be helpful. And you have to do it continuously. And let me tell you, that will be the first thing to go. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, now I'm overwhelmed again. I was working with a woman earlier in the week and she was feeling real down because she had created such a good system for herself. She was doing all of the things, had such a good plan. And then we had missed connecting because she had too much going on. And she said, I hated the feeling of the overwhelm. It made me feel so anxious and uncomfortable. And I was really, she was kind of down on herself for getting back to this space. But what I reminded her, and I want to remind you, is when you start something and you have these new habits, it is so normal that when life throws shit at you, I want to say backslide. You fall back into who you were, into the patterns that you knew so well. And you will then realize, oh shit, I'm back here. I don't like it here. And then how do you get back? Make a plan. And that's what we worked on. We made a plan to get where she was. And that will happen. And it will probably, I told her, I'm like, that's probably going to happen a couple times. And that's okay. It's not a failure. You recognized, oh, I'm doing the same patterns that I was doing before that were making me feel overwhelmed. I was double booking my schedule. I didn't have any time. I wasn't making time for my exercise. I wasn't creating that time for myself. And once you do that, once you recognize that, it's course correcting. It's not a failure. You didn't do anything wrong. Life happened. And then you just get right back to it. That's okay. And it will probably happen a couple times and you will realize it sooner and sooner and sooner. And then you'll realize it while it's happening. When people are asking for your time or you're having all of these things happen, if I do this, I'm going to end up in overwhelm. So I'm not going to do that. And then eventually it's just second nature. But until you get there, if you break the habit that you're starting, don't worry about it. As soon as you have that realization, get back to it. It is not a failure. What are the things that absolutely fill you up, that make you feel so much joy? That is what you need to make space and time for. You have to create time for yourself. You have to. Even if it just starts with 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes, carving out that time and making it for yourself. If you love dancing, dance. It can be gardening. It can be, I'm going to set aside 10 minutes a day to plan out my next day. This is something I hear all the time. If I planned ahead, I wouldn't feel so overwhelmed in the next day. So taking just that time to plan, you have to take your time back. Stop fucking giving it to everyone else and take it back. The next thing is, until you break this cycle, and it's a cycle that we're in. We are creatures of habit. Until you break this cycle, you have to be different. You can't be a person who is not overwhelmed while still having the habits of an overwhelmed person. You can't be a runner. You can't be a nurse. You can't be whatever it is without doing the things are required to be that person. So if you want to be less overwhelmed, you have to be different. You can't get there by the same things you're doing today. So getting over that, becoming okay with that, making different choices, thinking differently. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to commit to making time for yourself. You have to commit to making people own up to their shit. Stop taking on everybody else's stuff. What are the things that you have control over that you're not doing anything about? Are you just not getting out of bed in the morning? But you know that if you did, if you got up and exercised, you would feel better? And let me just take a second to back this one out. Most of the time, people are not getting out of bed because they're so fucking tired because they're not going to bed early enough at night. So what do you need for a nighttime routine? What do you need to do? Like, trace it back. But you have to start being a different person. You have to start making different choices. And you don't have to do it all at the same time. If you do it all at the same time, you're probably going to get more overwhelmed and then just give up, right? Just pick something. Pick one thing and just baby steps. Just do it. But you have to be doing something different or you're going to end up, you're just going to stay where you are. No change will happen. It's a constant cycle of unlearning and then relearning. We have been programmed as women to take on all the things, to do all the things, to do them all so well, to say yes, to be nice, to not make people uncomfortable. And we have to unlearn that. Not all at the same time. You can start with just saying no, creating some boundaries around your time, not taking on other people's shit. It's going to feel uncomfortable. And as you start small and you flex that muscle, you will relearn how to be. You will learn a different pattern. And then it will be so easy. And then you will have more time. But this is a cycle. And as we evolve, as you evolve as a person, new things, just as I started out kind of saying how my life has shifted. Things are constantly evolving. And we have to have new patterns of behavior to thrive in those. We can't necessarily rely on the shit-ass communication that we never learned because maybe you had a family who didn't talk about anything difficult, who didn't have hard conversations, who just turned the other way and pretended that, that doesn't exist. We're just going to put a smile on. Guess what? Hello, fucking overwhelm. Because if you don't want to have a conversation, you're just going to take it on. So you have to unlearn, you have to shed these old patterns, these things that have got you in this cycle of overwhelm and start becoming who you want to be, this person who has less overwhelm. And this is a long-term plan. This is not a short term. We already did the short term, how to just kind of relieve that pressure, turn that faucet off. This is the hole in the bottom of the cup that in a year from now, you will be less overwhelmed. The women that are in my circle from last year. I shared this last week on talking about being uncomfortable because they have done the work. And now they're saying, okay, I'm here and it's a little bit uncomfortable. I have this free space. And that is okay. That is absolutely to be expected. But they got here. This took a year's worth of time. So also knowing you are planning for the person of next year. But if you get to next year and you look back and you're like, fuck, I didn't do it. And I'm still feeling like I'm drowning. You don't have to. If you start today, you can be a different version next year. You can be a person that doesn't feel like they're drowning, but you have to do something differently. And you can do it. You absolutely can do it. You have to believe you can do it, make a plan to do it, but you can do it. All right. I hope you feel like you can do this because it is a great place to be when shit happens and you're like, okay, I have the tools to handle this. And in this episode, I know that you have the tools within this episode. Maybe listen to it a couple times. Things might hit a little differently, but you absolutely have the tools. And if you want to join my circle, you're like, you know what? I want to work with you. I want to have access to this every single week for the next 7 months to be able to work on my shit so that by next summer, I'm not going to feel like I feel today. Send me a message, follow the link in the notes. We will get the shit done. You will feel so much better, so much calmer and lighter and at peace and not like you are drowning. All right. Have a fabulous week, and I look forward to connecting with you next time.
Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.